Good evening, everyone. It's Hanifa Menon from hearthealthbrainhealth.com, encouraging healthy grieving and mindful actions. Today, I wanted to talk about a quotation that I know I've used before in other videos, and it's certainly something that I believe strongly. So, I wanted to start with this and then share something with you, and hopefully, it will allow some reflection for you. So, this quotation is by Teilhard de Chardin, and its content says, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." And I so believe this. And it's been years that I've believed this. But yesterday I had this wonderful opportunity to go to a special place. It's called the Chinmaya Vedanta Heritage Center. And it's right here in Ontario. And it's a place that I've wanted to go to for quite some time, for years now. Yet, I haven't had the opportunity and I haven't felt very comfortable about driving the distance to it. And yesterday, a very close friend of mine offered a ride there, and she was going to offer myself and another lady a ride. And I thought, you know what? I'd like to do this. I'm here, right now, and I'm very much in present moment thinking and believe in the power of now. So it was a perfect opportunity to go. So we went, and what an experience it was! It was so lovely. It's again the first time that I've been to that center, and the first time that I've seen a whole, I guess it was a celebration too, in terms of a particular deity and a particular god. And it was just such a wonderful experience. I mean, for one thing, it was the group that was there was a very kind energy. And of course, remember, this is my first time there. So they were definitely very welcoming and kind to me, I felt. And that's a wonderful introduction. But I went because there was a speaker that was speaking, and it's Swami Ishwarananda. And this is a Swami that I have actually watched and listened to on YouTube, on the web, regularly for many years. And when I saw that he would be arriving here to speak, I thought, what an opportunity to actually see this person speak live. And boy, what a treat. I have to tell you that the process, what we came in, we kind of set up, we sat down, we waited for things to begin, and there was some, I'll call it prayers, and it was definitely some Vedic chanting. And in the Vedic chanting, of course, Vedic chanting is in Sanskrit, and I love Sanskrit, though I don't understand all the words, but there's a feeling about chanting. And if you've ever listened to chanting of any sort, but Vedic chanting definitely touches me. So does Gregorian chanting. So does Arabic chanting, or we'll say prayers. And again, all of these have this energy of a depth of reverence. And this comes through even just the sounds, but certainly also the words. When we know the words, they're also very reflective of a depth of connection with something beyond us. And it was interesting. So we listened to that, and then after that, there was a lecture, and the lecture was fantastic. And as I said, I've listened to this man lecture quite often on YouTube, but this was seeing him live, and it was just as good and maybe better because there was this combined energy of the entire group there. And then we had we had a meal, and then we had a a little discussion time with the entire group, and there were two swamis. So there was a Swami Ishwarananda, as I mentioned, there was a Swamini, and they were just sitting up at the front for us to ask any questions as a group as we sat just basically at their feet. And it was so lovely because it was just a discussion, and it was such a beautiful discussion. It was very welcoming and warm. And in that time, we got into the conversation of reincarnation. And it's interesting when we think about reincarnation, for those that believe in reincarnation, there is this feeling that this life, if I do all these good things, I'll come back in the next life in a better experience, something happier, something, let's say I've always had struggles with money, I might come back in the next life as very rich. So that sort of idea. So this is one thing. And then, of course, there's this idea of liberation or moksha, meaning we don't need to come back as human forms anymore. So there's this direction, whether we look at it from Buddhist perspective or we look at it from Hindu perspective, is very much like that. Now, when we look into secular religions, remember that it's very similar too, right? If I'm good enough, I will get into heaven. And this is a rebirth into this heaven space. Now, both of these are thinking of the soul. And this was the thing that we were talking about in terms of reincarnation. We talked about also the intersection of science and spirituality. And this is where, there's a lot of communication right now, a lot of research, a lot of discussion about how both are becoming very, very close and very similar. And then we were talking about how evolution from this Vedantic perspective is not this idea of we evolved from, an animal form into a human form. It's that we've always been human, and then we are evolving as humans. And then animals are evolving, or insects are evolving into animals, into humans. That is more the evolutionary from science perspective. Whereas in this Vedantic perspective, and it was such a wonderful way to look at this, is if we're again recognizing that we are not this body, we are not this mind, which is a very familiar thinking in a number of different traditions. And again, if we think of we are the soul, that's that everlasting, most people think of that in terms of heaven, for example, if we're thinking of secular religion. And many think of this in terms of a soul liberation, in terms of Vedantic training, or even in terms of Buddhism. So in this, there's this idea of a freedom from an encasement of a form sort of idea. Yet, so when he was talking about this, based on some questions that were coming up, and he mentioned this idea that when we're recognizing that we're not this, it's the soul energy that is coming through different forms. It's the soul energy. This energy, so you don't even have to call it soul, if you call it just energy, this energy based on the karma that is done by a form, the soul is evolving. So the soul in a human has this huge blessing of evolving to higher and higher spaces. And I loved this idea because I think a lot of people forget this. So even though we read these sorts of quotations, so again, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. What a blessing. Can you imagine that the spirit that we are is coming through a human form? And do you realize how much joys, how much love, how much peace we can consciously experience? So when we look at something like an animal, they're not trying to get to a place of peace. And lots of people will talk about things like, oh, in my next life, I want to be a cat, or I want to be a dog, or that's the life, that sort of idea. Might be. When you might know that they're very, very dependent, and if they're out in the wild, it's not an easy life at all. And then we would think that, oh, well, humans don't have an easy life at all either. But humans have this ability to help in a way that no other creature can. The ability to do this is based on these beautiful resources that we've got right within ourselves in our human forms. And I thought this was such a beautiful way to look at this because, again, we talked about animals will help each other. So within a particular animal family, of course, they will help each other and look out for each other and that sort of thing for a certain length of time, and then they're on their own most of the time. There are some animals that stay in a monogamous relationship, I'm going to say, for life. So the couple, the parents are always together. So we see swans doing this, and there's different animals that do this, and it's lovely. But again, children are moving beyond. With humans, we have the ability to help more than just humans. And this is the thing, that when we look at it from how animals behave, they're not going to go out and um, try to help something that is not really part of itself until it has some learning and some connection with that other. And for us, we have information that we can read. We have an understanding of things that we might see on TV, we might hear about, we might read about. We've got so much information of things that we don't even need to go through ourselves to have compassion and love for others. And we also talked about, he actually mentioned this, that I really loved, that there are many spiritual beings in human forms that behave like animals. And we know this. This could happen from, uh, let's say, aggression, I think, would be a perfect example of when an animal is fighting for something, it becomes very aggressive. And there are a lot of people that have leaned a little bit more towards anger and lean towards aggression. So we know there's that. There's also this greed, right? So I want this, so I don't want anyone else to get this. And humans can do this too, and humans can also have very little and share it. And this is interesting because it's not really an animal tendency. An animal, it's like, I've got to make sure I'm fed. A human can actually say, I can wait till the next meal. We see most often, I'll say the example is, I'll say a parent, but many times we think of a mother that will often give her child something before she'll give herself something. So this is so interesting that if we are sitting and reflecting and understanding these concepts, we can understand that energies can come through people. And unless we see them as the blessing that they are, we don't allow ourselves to evolve to the best of human capability. And so I loved this quotation. I wanted you to know that this was the gist of the discussion, at least, certainly not of the lecture itself, which was also fabulous, but way too much information for this video. But this gist of this discussion, I really wanted to share with you for your own reflective time. And then I came across one more quotation that I thought I'd share with you. This one is by Adrienne Marie Brown. And this quotation I thought was just lovely. It says, "Things are not getting worse, they are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil." I love this. And when we think about pulling back the veil, in Vedic thinking at least, and I would say some Buddhism, perhaps Jainism, and perhaps every religion, quite honestly, is pulling back the veil of untruths and the things that human minds can get caught up in, which in Vedic tradition, Advaita especially, is about overcoming the space of duality: rich, poor, good, bad, um, young, old, all of our biases that we have, but also have that duality. All of that, this thought, the thought, thinking, right? Thinking can be our best friend, because when we intellectualize and we reason and we understand, it can lead to compassion and love. When we are not in that understanding space, we can think of it as a clouded covering on our vision, which is like the veil that is covering oftentimes a lot of society. And of course, this is contributed by everyone in society. Now, it only takes one person to start pulling this veil, to recognize that other people can join and also pull this veil. And then we live in the real, which is the real depth of human evolution. This is the space of peace. This is the space of love. This is the space of compassion. This is the space of unity. This is the space I wish for all of us, and I leave you with that thought and reflection today. I wish you have a fabulous night if you're here in Ontario or somewhere near here. And if you're across the world, I hope you have a great morning. I wish you a fabulous day ahead, and I hope you remember, transform your mind and transform your life. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.